Day 1320 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 1,115,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 870 in the past day. Then as for hardware, 4 tanks, 1 APV, 18 artillery, and a rocket artillery piece. Now, as for the manpower, Russia's contract bonuses have soared, with new recruits in Moscow now offered 6 million rubles, about 62,000 euros, or about 73,000 US dollars, to join the SMO. That's nearly double the previous national high of 3.2 million rubles, reflecting deepening manpower shortages driving up prices for new soldiers. And now, officials are leaning on businesses to fill the ranks, for instance in the Primorsky Krai region, where employers were told to pressure staff into enlisting or donate money toward recruitment. And as for the payouts, they sound lucrative, but most soldiers never see the full amount, and many don't even receive monthly pay when making it into the SMO. Not to mention they must buy their own gear and soldier on in an environment that faces rampant corruption, with SMO commanders skimming off the bonuses, typically by way of bribes, to keep these contract soldiers away from the front lines, but only for a short period. It's a recruitment loop built on desperation. The higher the bait, the emptier the ranks. Then lastly to mention for today's stats, not 1, but 2 oil refinery strikes over the weekend, coming from today and yesterday. So headed to the map as more mechanical birds of Ukrainian democracy struck into Russia's Kostovo oil refinery overnight, within the Nizhny Novgorod region, igniting fires visible on satellite data and social media footage. This facility is one of Russia's 5 largest refineries, taking the 4th spot, and is a key producer of motor fuels and lubricants. Explosions were reported by residents in the early hours of this morning, and NASA firm's detections confirmed a major heat signature over the southeastern part of the complex, where multiple processing units and storage tanks are located. The plant refines what amounts to approximately 5.5% of Russia's total refining capacity, making for a serious development. However, officials downplayed the incident, describing the blaze as a routine flare-off, but open-source imagery showed sustained fires inconsistent with normal operations, and where independent confirmation from local observers and orbital data indicated damage in at least one processing area, though to what extent for this site could not yet be verified. But what can be verified is clearly Ukraine is not letting up on these series of refinery strikes over the past 2 months or more now, as part of their sustained campaign, which can still feel all very surreal when it happens, especially as Russia continues to largely deny it's even happening at all. Now, the distance traveled for this latest wave of democracy birds was roughly 800 kilometers at minimum, or about 500 miles. But of course, that wasn't all, because earlier this weekend, a Ukrainian UAV wave landed on the Kryshi refinery in Russia's Leningrad region early into Saturday morning, triggering fires and adding damage to a key processing unit, as multiple drones were intercepted, leading to falling debris, igniting a blaze in the industrial zone, with that last comment being a statement coming from Leningrad Governor Drozdenko. Local industry sources reported the strike disabled the processing unit, which is responsible for nearly 40% of the plant's capacity, plus damage to a furnace and other equipment. So this is by no means a small update, as the plant is considered the second largest refinery throughout Russia, pumping 20 million tons in annual production capacity, and marking the second time this site was hit within a space of 3 weeks. Problematically, the Soviet-era Kryshi refinery, modernized now, runs on Western hardware, Honeywell controls, Loomis cracking tech, that Moscow can no longer replace under sanctions. Each strike doesn't just burn steel, it unravels the precision systems keeping one of Russia's most advanced fuel plants alive. To cope, operators plan to boost output in undamaged units by 20%, but that's just a band-aid fix. The plant's interlinked systems means every extra push for additional output strains machinery, trading short-term flow for long-term failure. And now, fuel shortages in Russia are spreading to more and more regions, as we're looking at a case of death by 1,000 cuts. Over just the past week, reports were received from 35 regions dealing with shortages, and as for the total now, problems were reported in 56 of Russia's 83 regions, as portrayed on this map. Technically, 30 to 40% of Russia's surface area is unaffected. Take one of these regions' examples of, say, Sakha, but you won't exactly find much of civilization around these parts, which all leads to shortages that now account for 80 to 90% of the Russian population, most of whom can be found in the west of the country. And more than just markings on the map, we continue to see what feels like countless footage of regions all throughout Russia where citizens are in a mad dash on the hunt to locate automotive gasoline as part of their new part-time hobby. Take this example, Khabarovsk Krai. 3 districts are in the grip of a severe crisis, and for one such district, of the 9 gas stations available, only 1 is operating, and doing so with a 10-litre gas rationing limit per customer. Also seen in the bordering region to Ukraine of Bryansk, where new fuel rationing has been imposed, where this time the restriction is not set by litres, but in rubles, as drivers can only purchase A92 gasoline for up to 1,000 rubles per transaction every 3 days, which is the equivalent to roughly 12 litres or about 3 US gallons, slightly less. But with gas prices on the increase locally, the 1,000 ruble limit provides motorists no guarantees on a minimum fuel takeaway, as demand rises and supply shrinks. Ultimately, these recent strikes on Russian oil infrastructure are perhaps one of the most revolutionary aspects to come out of this war so far, because battlefield innovations can be adapted to, but critical infrastructure is more difficult to replace, with hardening and decentralizing such facilities long recognized as one of the most complex challenges a nation at war can face. Then headed to the northwest of the Russian map briefly, with weekend reports on Ukrainian special forces striking a Russian Boyan M-class corvette on Lake Onega at Karelia, nearly 1,000 kilometers from Ukraine, and part of a strike believed to have damaged its engine compartment. Unfortunately, little in the way to verify this, with no media to show, as the incident happened outside the visual scope of your average Russian civilian that is normally found to be in a populated region. But what we can always see up this neck of the woods is the Russian-occupied portion of Finnish Karelia, where across the border, Finland ranks among the highest living standards on the planet, but on the Russian side, decay and squalor. Now to the main map with follow-up activity to show as Ukraine's 475th Assault Regiment created havoc for the invaders' advance as part of their own operations north of Kupiansk, using a mix of conventional firepower and FPV drones, as the Ukrainian unit continues to inflict heavy losses here. Then to further down the map, where Ukrainian defense forces cleared former enemy advances around the location of Sosnivka, which also included parts of the Novoselivka and Koroshi settlements. Simultaneously, Russian forces advanced just next door, southwest of Sosnivka, though given their recent gains on this wider sector of the map, they were probably not looking to put up much of a fight here, or come across much resistance until now. Beyond that, and further up the map, Phoenix border guards destroyed a Russian TOS-1A heavy flamethrower system in the Pokrovsk direction. This latest event now marks almost the 40th loss of this platform, with Russia expected to have about 50 in total, numbers which are consistent with us seeing these TOS-1As identified and destroyed only once a month or so now. And given the very nature of these thermobaric multiple rocket launcher systems, they always tend to ignite spectacularly when struck, as their fuel-air munitions detonate in a chain reaction visible for miles. Then further up the map at Bakhmut, and at a minimum distance of 10 kilometers away from the front into the occupied rear, a Russian D-30 Type 122mm howitzer was destroyed by Ukrainians in counter-battery combat, with the uploaded visuals coming direct from the occupiers. Also seen on the map, Ukrainian drone units from the 15th Karadag National Guard Operational Brigade are destroying boats Russian forces use to transport ammunition and supplies across the river, likely occurring somewhere in Kharkiv for this event. And as can be seen, some of these inflatables were spotted and targeted on the Russian-controlled side of the river, while others failed to show any occupants on board at all. But this is because they jumped ship just prior, when hearing the inbound buzz of the AFU FPVs. Then to the news, and to catch up on quite a bit of Russian economy news, where, starting off, Russia's buckwheat harvest is set to drop by around a third this year, falling to its lowest level in 6 years as farmers abandon the crop and weather cuts yields. The AB Center, which is a Moscow-based agricultural market research and consulting firm, estimates production at 788,000 tons, down 35% year on year, although the Agriculture Ministry claims huge inventories that will prevent shortages. But even with the lesser figure of 180 tons in stock, supply strain is inevitable as sowing areas shrink and oilseed crops expand. The potential for price controls may delay the pain, yet collapse in output risks turning into scarcity once reserves run low. Meanwhile, Russia is covering its growing budget gap by forcing local banks to buy government bonds, using central bank loans to fund the purchases. Last week alone, the finance ministry sold 230 billion rubles in new debt, and where the deficit has already blown past the yearly target, about 5 trillion rubles so far, as oil revenues fall and military spending stays high. So to keep up, the government is borrowing more than planned. As such, next year's interest payments will take up a growing share of the state budget. It's turning into a financial loop. The government prints bonds, banks are pushed to buy them, debt costs rise, and the gap keeps widening, all of which doesn't even factor in their own deepening oil crisis they have on their hands now. Then lastly for this segment, overdue mortgages in Russia are now climbing at their fastest pace in years, as shown on this chart. In the past month, the volume of loans overdue by 90 days rose another 7%, and over the year, it's jumped by about 120%. The sharp rise began in late 2023 and has steepened through this year, as high interest rates and shrinking real incomes make repayments harder. With mortgage rates hovering around 25% and household savings running thin, the trend points to an ever-growing pressure on both borrowers and lenders. Also to note here, I showed the previous update of this graph last month, which is still headed in the same direction, with red showing the share of overdue mortgages as a percentage of all mortgage loans, and blue showing the total overdue mortgage debt, which is decidedly parabolic. Then to a quick funny to round off the video today, a little lowbrow, but with a report on the attempted poisoning of Assad in Moscow, the former Syrian dictator who sought refuge in Russia after his regime collapsed in December of 2024. And just as noteworthy for this news is that the report came from a pro-Assad monitoring group called the SOHR. So due to a report coming out of this nature, perhaps Putin invited Assad in for a cup of that famously energizing polonium tea, after Assad had been outliving his usefulness to the Kremlin, perhaps on concerns of only becoming a liability now for information leaks. Though realistically, I doubt the two ever met since the former Syrian dictator secured his safe refuge in Russia. So should Assad be poisoned again, or poisoned to completion, information. It would show how Russia's talent for betraying allies keeps circling back with every safe haven offer extended to its trusting dictatorship allies that would only end up with Russia poisoning itself, metaphorically speaking. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment. Thanks for the support, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!